This is part 3 of this series. If you haven't done so already, I recommend you go back and watch part 1 and part 2. But here we are on site with the excavator breaking ground and digging our hole into which I'll be building our little cabin. Of course, putting this log cabin underground adds an extra layer of complexity to our project. It means I'm going to have to build a retaining wall around 3 sides and ensure that there's a big enough air gap all the way around so that air can circulate around and under the cabin at all times. In terms of foundations, I opted for the simplest and lightest method I could think of. This is for 3 reasons. Firstly, it's a small building. Secondly, we're effectively in a way below the frost line. But also the site itself is really well draining ground. Now, just before we get going, I want to make a quick point about something I said in the part 2. So this is that infill post that I'm adding to the back wall so that it matches up with the post at the door. I just want to make a point about if using this system where you're just basically adding a 2x2, which will then go into the groove on the other post, that, as I said, firstly, no screws at the top, but other than that, I group them in the screws in groups of 2, because even though the vertical post is going to shrink almost not at all, it nevertheless does shrink a tiny bit. So I group the screws in 2s. And in that way make up for that little tiny bit of shrinkage that's going to be. To be honest, it probably is unnecessary. The screws will probably give enough, but why not? Just to be sure. So with that cleared up, here I am putting in the floor supports. Now, conventional wisdom would dictate that you would build the building and then put in a floor, but I tend to think outside the box. And in this instance, what I've decided to do is to build a floor and then build the building on top of it. So then I got to work on that retaining wall around 2 sides of the building to start with, so I can get going. So I'll put down the floor. I think the camera battery had run out, but it doesn't matter. It's just 28mm tongue and groove floorboards, and then I got that protected a bit with some paper and got that first post lifted up. It's nice and easy at this stage. Move it around, change the angle, make sure it's vertical, Okay, so here I am on site, and I've got the retaining wall there, and I've lifted the first post into place. I made the joint where it sits on top of the 2x4s a little bit loose on this one deliberately so I could get the post in place and then slide those 2x4s into it. Now I've screwed the 2x4s down, but that's temporary. I just want to lift the post out the way, lift these 2x4s back up and put down the rolls of insulation. And the reason I screwed them already is now there's screw holes to show where the screws are going to go through, so I can open a little hole in the insulation, because that insulation gets all bound up on the heads of the screws, or not the heads, the points of the screws as they go through, so I want to make a little space for each screw. So I'll get that done, lift the post out the way, get the 2x4s up and put the insulation down. So, assuming you've seen the first two parts of this series, you'll have seen me put this building together once, so I'm not going to bore you by making you watch through it all again. I'll skip through a lot of it, but I will detail the things that are different now that we're on site. Insulation has got to go between every log, and have to remember the ends of those logs as well. Those tongue and groove joints, they were kind of loose deliberately on the first build, but now with insulation put in there, they go nice and tight. In fact, got to use a sledgehammer to get them in. So as well as adding insulation, we're also going to have to add pegs. That's what's going to give the building its side-to-side strength. So with each log that we put on, we're going to drill through that and well into the log underneath and put in a wooden peg. Now the problem here is that the insulation between the logs is going to prevent that drill going through. It binds up on the point. So I put the log on first, screw it down with no insulation in between, so I can drill that hole. Then I'm going to have to unscrew the log, lift it off, put the insulation in, put the log back on, and then peg it. So this process just repeats over and over again with every log. But a couple of points before we fast forward. Once I've drilled the hole, I measure it. I use one of those plastic tubes that I've used as rollers, and then the actual peg should be cut a little shorter. I do about 1.5 centimeters shorter than the hole is, and that's so that as the log wall settles and drops, those pegs are not going to carry the log above. And how deep should the holes be? I aim at going all the way through that log on top, and then 3/4 of the way through the log underneath. which in this case, in this building, ends up being somewhere between 40 and 50 centimetres. Okay, let's fast forward. With the strips of insulation put into the grooves on the posts become very tight to put on, but they can be pulled into place with a ratchet strap at the top and with a sledgehammer at the bottom. About halfway through the build, that's the back wall all done. I'm doing this side wall, and with every log that I put in, this gap is growing. This post is actually perfectly vertical at the moment, but it kind of suggests that when I built it back at home that it wasn't, which is fine. I can't push the logs along because I need this line to stay straight, but until the roof frame is actually in place, everything is flexible with this. So I'm going to carry on building this wall. We'll have quite a big gap at the top, but then I'll put the ratchet straps around the top and I'll pull this post in to meet the ends of these logs. These logs are all tied together with the pins, the dowels, but it's just another example of how flexible this system is. course, once the window was in place, I realised my mistake, but it was too late to do anything about it. Luckily, the two logs that were in the wrong places were around about the same size, so the level of the window hasn't changed. So here we are on site, and the walls are up to the point that I left it there at home, and things have changed a little bit. Decided at the last minute with the customer that we would increase the length of the building, so I added in this post, and also increase the width of the building, so added in an extra post here and here. And we had a little bit of a problem with getting the right size of door, so the door that we've actually got is an 80 centimeter wide door, or the frame of the door is actually 79 centimeters, and the gap that we have here is 74 centimeters. Now obviously what I could do is cut some out of here or here, but I kind of anticipated that we were going to have possibly a problem with this. So when I built this wall, the wall with the window and the other wall with the window, I didn't attach the 2x4 that runs along underneath the wall to the floor, so that in theory, and hopefully in practice, I can actually move the building a bit. I'm going to cut here, and with a crowbar at first, let's see what it takes. I'm going to move this whole section of building 5 centimeters that way, so the door fits snugly. Like I said, it's a 79 centimeter frame, and it's recommended that goes into at least an 8 centimeter hole, but that's really for ease of installation. I'm going to get this to just a hair over 79. Of course, the last sections of log that you're going to put in have to be lifted all the way to the top of the posts and then dropped down, slid down in the grooves. So plan the build to end up above a door with nice, light, easy to manage sections. I should have mentioned that when pegging, always mark the wall where you're putting the peg in, so that when you put the next log on top, you can avoid that place and avoid drilling down through the first log and into a peg underneath. Just have to stagger the placings of the pegs. But once again, we're getting close to 20 minutes on this video, so I'm going to have to end it here and then carry on next time with getting the roof on.